And I am joyful to be here as well. The reason I made this distinction between joy and happiness is my happiness is so fragile. I can be happy 1 minute and then angry the next or disappointed. And that's just the way happiness is. I get really joyful sometimes when I'm having my quiet time, and then I try and sing, and then my happiness leaves, but my joy's still there because I sing terrible. But my joy is there. And this morning, I want to talk to y'all about James chapter 1. And so I hope you have your Bible. And we're going to go over these verses. Thank you. We got these verses up. And I am going to read them. My dear wife was going to come. She got ready and everything, but she encountered a trial in her knee, and it was really hurting her, so she didn't come. This is out of the English Standard Version. I'll be reading. Well, let me just read out. Is that English Standard? All right. Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness, and let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect, complete, lacking in nothing. And if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given to him. But let him ask in faith, with no doubting. For the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea that is driven and tossed by the wind. For that person must not suppose that he will receive anything from the Lord. He is a double-minded man, unstable in all his ways. And I just think of that verse where it says, if you don't ask in faith, just don't. Why bother? You're not going to receive anything. So let's pray. Lord Jesus, we thank you so much for your grace to us. We thank you for your word. We thank you that this is the word of the Lord. And I am so humbled and blessed to be here this morning to be able to share my thoughts on these verses. I pray that you would lead me. I pray that you would give me wisdom. And I ask that in faith. And I pray for my brothers and sisters here. I pray that you would give them grace and wisdom. I pray that as we look at what our brother James wrote for us, through the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, that we would apply these things to our lives. In Jesus' name, amen. There's another verse I'm going to hit in James chapter 4, but for right now, I just wanted to go over this. Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds. That's a tough sentence. That's a tough command. Count it all joy when you encounter various trials, when you meet various trials. And I think of it joy. I got to count it as joy. And going back onto what joy is, it's not happiness. I'm not happy that I encounter various trials. I'm not happy when I get a cold. I'm not happy when as our brother preached last week, with the instability of our world, the instability, the uncertainty of our times. That doesn't make me happy. It's a trial. But why, as we get into these verses, why should we be joyful? Why should we have joy? And the key in here is verse 3, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. Steadfastness is, one translation says steadfastness, English Standard Version. I think the King James says patience. And then the New American Standard and the Living Bible say endurance. And those are all good translations of the same word. But when I think of steadfastness, I think of someone that is firm. He stays with it. And so God says, look, when I encounter various trials, what is God trying to do with me? He's trying to make me steadfast. And I look around in this congregation, and I think, I see steadfastness. You just keep doing it. And then you need steadfastness to have endurance. Another side of that same coin is endurance. Just endurance, you keep moving forward. It's a long race. I've been on this race for about 50 years, and I've needed endurance to keep on it. And so you need endurance. So when I encounter a trial, here's what I'm looking. These times are unstable. My finances go up and down. My health goes up and down. What is God trying to do in me? I lose a job. Or I'm working for a man that might be a tyrant. Or whatever the trial is, God's going to do something. He's going to give me endurance. He's going to cause me to go forward. But where does that joy come from? The joy comes from the Lord. Only that the chorus in that first song that we sang, Walking in the Garden. Can you bring that up? It says, there we are. And the joy we share as we tarry there, no one has ever known. Okay, that's good, but where does that start from? And he walks with me, and he talks with me, and he tells me I am his own. You know when I need to hear that? Is when I'm in a trial. I need to hear that in a trial. I need to have that as my experience. When I get in the trial, that's when it gets tested. When everything is good, when my life is going smooth. I once prayed this prayer, and it was my most infamous prayer. We were really struggling financially. My business was losing money every month, and I was really struggling. And I remember exactly where I was. I was on I-25 on the bridge just before you get to Salado Pueblo. And I said, God, if I just have money, I wouldn't need you. That's why I say that's most infamous prayer. See, but I was going through a trial, and then God wanted me to have joy, and I had a lack of joy and a terrible lack of happiness. I was a miserable man. And then I prayed this really, I'll just say it, it was a stupid prayer. A prayer that it says in James chapter 4, that was just about me. But as I'm going through these trials, what did God want me to do? I repented of that. Hallelujah. And then things started going differently, but I was trying to learn from God. There was another time I was in a trial and I needed patience. You know, patience is about keeping going when there's a delay. You know, you're hoping that somebody's going to grow spiritually. You're hoping that you'll become more mature. You're hoping that you'll be more patient. Well, I was lost. And I just really get in the flesh when I'm lost. And I was, I prayed this prayer, and this wasn't so bad, but I rolled my window down. I was in my truck. I rolled my window down in my truck, and I said, I'm not doing anything bad. I just want to get to work. I was delayed. I wasn't walking with him in the garden. I wasn't spending time with him in the garden. I didn't have the faith to believe that God was going to do something with this. That just during that time of my life, God was changing me. I was going through a lot of trials. It was probably one of my wilderness time. I was struggling. And then as God started to get a hold of my life, as I started walking with him, as I started praying, God, show me, what are you wanting to do with me? Why am I here? What got me to this point? You know, when my business was doing badly and I was losing money, I was in the middle of God's will. God had planned that for me. God planned that. Because when I started walking with him, when I started looking to him, when I started looking to his promises, when I started to believe him, he started to change things. He opened my spiritual ministry. I'm not only my business, see, my business was where I was working, but I wanted to work with people. I was discipling certain men. I was discipling my children. And God used that time to get a hold of my life and say, look, do you believe me? Do you believe me? Do you believe that you can pray and that I can change your situation? Wow. And that's what these verses say. For you know that the testing of produces steadfast, and let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect, complete, lacking in nothing. I was lacking. There's my character. See, what God is the most interested in is your character. What do you like? Your character is a good, when you think of character, it's like a cup. When you shake a cup, if it's full of coffee, coffee spills out. With you and I, when God shakes us up, we find out what's in your character. And so God is developing the character of his people through these trials. So now I count it all joy. It's not easy all the time, but why do I count it joy? Because I know who God is. I know who Jesus is. I count Jesus as my joy. He said he would never leave me nor forsake me. He said if I asked by faith, that he would give me what I wanted, what I needed. I believed him. I started asking in faith. I started asking why I was asking those questions, why I was asking for what I was needing. My character started to develop. And then as I was doing that, my joy, my walk with the Lord in the garden. In the garden, there's roses, but the roses have thorns on them. And sometimes you get pricked. And when you get pricked, you can say, wow, what a beautiful rose. Or you can say some other things that are not edifying to you or anyone else that's standing near. I have this love-hate relationship with my GPS. When she gets me lost, she. See, if it was a guy, if my GPS was a man's voice and he got me lost, I would say, hey, bro, it happens. When my GPS, the lady, I think, and I start calling it names, and then my wife said, I'm in the car with you, and it's just not edifying to hear you yelling at the GPS. I'm waiting for what I really need to have in my GPS is a voice that comes up and says, is there anyone in the car that can follow instructions? And that's, but see, as I'm going through this, it's a trial. But now, I am working. God is working. And he'll never leave me nor forsake me. When I run into this trial, see, it's a delay, patience. I'm delayed. I thought I was going to get somewhere, and I'm delayed. And so, one of the times that I got lost, God did a wonderful miracle. I was in Maryland on my way to New Jersey, and I got lost on the Beltway around Washington, D.C., and I was trying to get up to New Jersey, and I ended up going towards Delaware, and then I didn't have a GPS, so I didn't blame it on her. And then I just was so frustrated with the whole thing. And then my wife, the other Holy Spirit in the car with me, said, honey, God has a plan for this. It's okay. Calm down. So I did. And then we're driving along. And we met a girl. We were going to a Christian conference, so we met a girl from Texas that had got left behind by her bus. And nobody even knew she had got left behind. And that delay worked out for us to give her a ride. And when we got to New Jersey, they still didn't know that she was gone. And it was before cell phones and stuff, so. But that's patience. So God is working that out for my character. Now, as I'm going through, as I'm walking in the garden with the Lord, as I go through trials, it's my walk with Him that gives me joy. He's the one who said, I will never leave you nor forsake you. He's the one, when I die, the first face I'm going to look for in heaven is His. When I open up my eyes, I'm going to see His face. When I take my first breath, it's going to be the air of heaven. Why? Because Jesus is my joy. I look forward to that. When I encounter various trials, I remember that that is true, that I walk in the garden with Him. But the trials push me towards Him, or they can push me away from Him, and they push me towards my flesh. And nothing good comes out of my flesh. But with Him, I know all things are possible. With Him, I know that I can do all things through Him who strengthens me. Yeah. Through Him, I have joy. Even when I'm not happy. And that joy, these trials are bringing that joy around. And then as I go through this, I think of that acronym, JOY, Jesus, others, and you. Other place that joy comes from is others. Paul said over and over in all the epistles, you guys, you men of Ephesus, you church in Ephesus, you are my joy. The Philippians, you guys are my joy. Wow. So people can be our joy. And as I look around here, and some of the people that I look at here, you are my joy. My joy comes first from the Lord, and He is steadfast, and He will not leave me. See, and my joy does come from other people. So if you want joy, you want real joy in your life. That's why God has you commit to being with a body of believers. Your joy will be here. But one of the things, unlike Jesus, other people will disappoint you. Other people will betray you. Your children, my children, are my joy. My grandchildren are my joy. But they're also my source of real trials. But then that's when I go back to the Lord. I committed all my children to the Lord. So I just go to the Lord and I say, Lord, I need wisdom. That's these next verses here. If anyone you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given to him. Wow. So as you go through a trial, it's an opportunity. Think of that trial as an opportunity for you to get wisdom. Lord, this job, should I take the job? Lord, should I go to such and such a city and make a profit? Lord, what if I don't make a profit? Are you still in control? If I run into a trial, are you still in control? And as I'm going through this, see, people will disappoint me, but the Lord will never disappoint me. And then I was just thinking a little bit of that, Jesus, others, and you. You know, I get joy, it comes back to the Lord to see where I've come. You know, when I became a believer, I just, before I was a believer, I tried not to swear. It just I just couldn't do it. Just, those words just came out. And I was afraid that I was only 19, and I was afraid that sometime I'm going to slip and say it in front of my mom or my dad, and then it's not going to be pretty. And then I became a believer. And it was just to my joy that those words just fell off.
Praise you.
That there's sins that I could not conquer. And so I get joy by seeing what God has done in my life. What God has done with me and as a father, as a husband. What God has done when I look at people that I have discipled. I get great joy from that. So my joy is consistent from the Lord. Others give me joy. And myself, I get joy, and it's also my greatest source of frustration and disappointment is in myself when I think that shouldn't bother you, that you messed up. You didn't believe. And then it goes here, but let him ask in faith with no doubting, for the one who doubts is like the wave of the sea that is driven and tossed by the wind. For that person must not suppose that he will receive anything from the Lord. He is a double-minded man, unstable in all his ways. So, when I pray, I need to pray in faith. But go over to chapter 4. This is something as we just got back from a trip, and we were in Dallas for a while, and then we were in Las Vegas, Nevada for a while, and we were praying that the trip would go well. We were praying that we would profit, and we were praying that we would have enough work that my employees would continue to work. And so I had to ask myself in chapter 4, and I think is in verse 2, I had to weigh out my prayers in the light of these verses here. You desire and do not have, so you murder. You covet and you cannot obtain, so you fight and quarrel. You do not have because you do not ask. You asked and do not receive because you ask with wrong motives to spend it on your own passions. So I weighed out my prayers. Why are you asking for this? Is that for your own self? Is it to go with what you're asking? Will that glorify God? Will that glorify other people? And so I weighed out my prayer, and I said, look, Lord, I would like to make a lot of money. Not for me, so that I can keep my employees working. And it'd be nice to pay my bills and my mortgage and all these other things. So I was not asking with wrong motives. So I said, Lord, I pray that this would be the best show ever. And I weighed it out. Why am I asking this? And it was the best show ever.
Praise the Lord.
Hallelujah. But I was asking with the right motive. Not on myself, not to spend it on myself, not for my own glory. But I wanted to glorify God, and I wanted to keep my employees working, and I wanted to pay my bills.
Amen.
So when I ask, I should ask believing. I could ask that prayer. When I ask that someone doesn't get sick, I can pray that believing. But if they do get sick, and I encounter a trial Then I go back to the Lord and say, well, God, you're in control. You're working this out for your glory. I'm looking forward to see what you're going to do. Maybe you'll just give me wisdom. Like maybe for some of you guys, it might be saying, yeah, Andy, start wearing your mask. I got vaccinated. I got all my stuff. Maybe that's the wisdom that God's trying to tell me. Whatever it is, I want to learn from God. What are you doing with it? If my prayers aren't answered immediately, if there's a delay, if I need patience, if I encounter a trial, what is the purpose of the trial? One, so that I might ask for wisdom, so that I might become more like Jesus, so that I might see Jesus glorified. Everything I have, any good thing you see in me, anything I have accomplished, is only because Christ in me, the hope of glory. So when you encounter various trials, when you meet a trial, count it all joy. God's going to work something out, working something out for your good. Not all things are good. Trials wouldn't be trials if they were good. Sometimes they're real pain. But God's going to work it out for my good. And then I pray, and I pray believing. This is my summary here. I pray. I ask God, why am I praying this? I believe God. Then I start looking for the answer. I start expecting God to answer. Father, I pray that you would give us all wisdom. I pray that you'd give us faith. I pray that we would be walking with you in the garden. That we would be trusting you. That our joy would be in you. Lord, thank you for all the happy times that you give me. But Lord, I thank you for the joy that is everlasting. In Jesus' name, amen.